Welcome to Living Chassidus. Together, let's live the Chassidus we learn.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Chassidus in the morning. 15 minutes to change our lives. This shir is sponsored by Nechama Dina Shusterman for health, simchas, nachas, and Moshiach now. Amen. And by Rivka Silverman for Akiva, Nechemia, and Rivka Shulamis. Thank you very much for the sponsorship, making this shir happen. Okay, so continuing on in the maamer. As we said yesterday, we're going to talk about the contrast between Matan Torah and Purim. So let's jump into it. So remember, we're saying we had these 5 questions or 4 questions. Why did it say the usual command? We already answered that. We said that's Moshe commanding, that's Moshe connecting. I should bring it to you. Shem Zay Zach, Kasis, why does it say crushed? To the luminary, not to lights. And also we said, why does it say Tamid? And then the next part says Me'evad Boiker. So what's going on over here? All these questions. So we started explaining that Moshe is Rayam Hemna, that basically Moshe's job is to feed and sustain the Yidden with their Emunah. And really we said that Moshe is like the head and we're like the feet. That through Moshe helping us with our Emunah, to make it Pnimius, it affects him. That's what we're talking, and that's what we had been talking about till now. Yeah, and not just Moshe, but the Moshe in every generation. Like Mordechai, which was the Moshe of his generation, like it says in the Medrash, that Moshe B'derei, that Mordechai B'derei, Moshe B'derei. And that's what we've been talking about so far. So now, we're coming, and so remember, we're basing this maamer, what we're learning is based off of maamer the Fidui. So now we're going to analyze this a little bit and bring out some beautiful points. The first point we can take away already is that we are the feet of the Rebbe. And whatever we think the Rebbe can accomplish and should accomplish, we have to realize that it's all based off us. And our job is to learn the Chassidus, figure out how we can apply it, and apply it to ourselves. When we do that, we're being the feet of the Rebbe. Now, page Daled. In a page 348 in this sefer. In a the explanation that after the tzava, maamer comes in the figure of the maamer behemshech maamer in continuation of what it says in the beginning of the maamer. In explaining, it says in the Megillah that the Jewish people took upon themselves what they had begun to do. What does this mean? It means like this. By Matan Torah, we received the Torah, but the real completion of receiving the Torah was by the story of Purim. Matan Torah was when they began. In the time of the decree of Haman, we were pushed to the walls. Was the receiving. And this we talked about yesterday. We said we're going to talk about this. This is what we're talking about. So by Matan Torah, we received the Torah, but by Purim, when actually completed that receiving. Why? What's going on over here? Let's see. Like it says in the Apostle, Kimum v'kibla Yehudim. It says in the Megillah, Kimu v'kiblu. What does that mean? They received and they established and they accepted. What does it mean? Kimu masha kiblu kvar. They established what they had already received. Because the Zeshek, this by Matan Torah, we all know the Yidden said we will do, and then we'll understand. We're in the program. That's what they said. But this that they were in the program was just a Kabbalah receiving. But in the time of Achashverosh, Kimu Masha Kiblu, then it became real. Essentially, what we're saying is they were not real in the time of the giving of the Torah, but only when they had Purim, that's when it became real. Now we have to understand this. This is very weird. It's a weird thing to say. Why? Because the Matan Torah, how you saw Matan Torah, we were on the highest of level. We learned in the Sichon about Shavuos. They had worked on themselves 49 days. They were on a very high madriga. And we're saying that even though they were on a very high madriga, it wasn't real. But yeah, had a revelation of godliness on the highest of levels. Because they already had these great revelations of godliness. Yamsuf, the 10 plagues, they were connected, they were seeing godliness on crazy levels. And even greater level was Matan Torah. But in contrast, how good were we? How many miracles were happening? How great revelation godliness was? It was on the ultimate opposite. How you saw with Achas, we were on a very low level. Besides the general concealment of Galus, the Chal Galus, who would do Dugmas Galus, and that every Galus is like the Galus Mitzrayim. That was, of course, very not good. The Kamoiba gives about Galus Mitzrayim, just like by Galus Mitzrayim, it says, "V'lo Shamuel Moshe Miketzu Ruach Mevei Kasha." They're so painful, the Galus of Mitzrayim, they couldn't even listen to Moshe because of the pain of the work and the hardship of the work. So that's a really bad Galus. All Galus is like this. And the Galus has challenges of doing Torah mitzvahs. So hine as bizman gezer Haman, and then the time of the gezer of Haman, it was even more of a concealment than general Galus. Galus was saying B'chal is not good, and there's a concealment in Torah mitzvahs, and concealment in general. But by the time of Purim, it was even worse. But nevertheless, what are we saying? We were on the highest of levels. We were great. It was like a girl in seminary that's learning and steiging and connected. That's only beginning. Like we say, they've begun to do. Whereas when when you're in Galus and you go back, and if you're Baal Tshuva and you go back home, and there's no kosher food in the house, and there's no kitchen, and you can't cook anything, you have to do all these things, and then you fall, and then you go back to your old ways, and you're not behaving as you should, and it could be that you go back, you're not even keeping Shabbos Chas Shalom, or you're going away and you're struggling. That's what we say. That's when you actually receive it. Why? Why is the lowest level what makes it so real versus the higher level makes it so not real? What's the answer? The Fidik explains. The answer is because it's Mesiras Nefesh. Besides the fact that Mesiras Nefesh not to go against Judaism, like I explained to her, Miriam, Dasam, Alter Rebbe gives his chiddush in the story of Purim that he says like this: that really one of the miracles of Purim was the fact that he says if the Yidden would have just given up on Yiddishkeit and said, you know what, I'm not going to be a Jew anymore, then nothing would have happened to them. The distraction that Achashverosh wanted and Haman wanted was on the Jewish people as being Jewish. If you stop being Jewish, you wouldn't have this issue. And that's what Alter Rebbe says. And what happens? So we have to understand that the Jewish people at that time are not doing good. You go to a party that is celebrating the fact that the Yidden, that there was a prophecy that went to 70 years after the destruction of the Mikdash, the Yidden are going to return. And they thought it was already 70 years. And it's not happening. So we've done. We concluded the Jewish people. They start taking out the vessels of the Beis Hamikdash and start having a party with it and play, and then everyone's there. And so the Yidden coming along, it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace, and they're giving in to all these things, and it's so bad. And that's when the decree happens. And what happens? They don't jump ship, but they go strong, and then they strengthen themselves. That's what we do. That's what that's what Alter Rebbe is saying. They said, you know what? Screw this, I'm not Jewish anymore. Done. They wouldn't have to worry about an issue. But none of them, the machshava didn't even come up in their mind. They didn't even think about this. Because the decree was only against the Jews. If you say, I'm not going to be Jewish, then you're free to go. But none of them did this. It didn't come up in anyone's mind such a thing. And what they do, they came back and did tshuva. And they pushed themselves and had Mesiras Nefesh on Torah mitzvahs. To the extent They gathered multitudes of people and thousands of people together publicly. Like, that was a big Mesiras Nefesh. You're basically identifying yourself as a Yid. And they realized what their way was, and that was a big Mesiras Nefesh. They said it was Mesiras Nefesh, and this aroused Mesiras Nefesh, which caused them to be able to do this. Mordechai Yehudi. This all really came back from Mordechai, which was the Moshe generation. And like we're seeing and we're talking about until now, like we're explaining that the job of the Moshe Rabbeinu, in that case Mordechai, in that case, say the Rebbe, or the previous generation, the Frierdiker Rebbe, their job is to strengthen that emunah, these people. And that's what Mordechai helped them do. That they realized, he helped them realize their ways where they were wrong, and to work on this and transfer and to change themselves and to go the right path. Now we can understand what does it mean. Specifically, in the time of the Gzeira of Haman, by the Purim story, is when they actually received the Torah. This is what it means, that they took upon themselves, that they received what they had already begun. The Matan Torah, because by Matan Torah was Raka Aschala, wasn't real. How do we know it's real? How do you know all the learning you did in seminary is real? Is when you go out of seminary. It's when you go out into the real world and you still stay as a from Jew. It was Matan Gzeira Haman, time of the decree of Haman, Pesach Kabbalah. That's when they really took it upon themselves. So when they had Mesiras Nefesh on doing Torah mitzvahs, in this idea, they raised themselves up even higher, even higher than what it was in time of Matan Torah. And that's why then is the Kabbalah. Because ultimately they're showing how real it is to them. And this is sort of ultimately we have to realize within ourselves that when we go in a good environment, whether you surround yourself in a good environment, it's nice and it's good. But how do you know it's real? How do you know it's real? Is when you're not in a good environment. And even though you might fall, like they did by the time of Mordechai, and they were in a bad situation. But when push comes to shove, and this is sort of why it's so important to connect to the Rebbe gives you the strength. When push comes to shove, come back up and you say, I'm in the program. And that's what they did. They accepted. And that's why it says now let's tie this back into what we're saying in the maamer. The explanation, what we say in the pasuk that crashed to the luminary, and that through being crashed, like it says in the pasuk, broken and pressed. That helps you reach the Mara, the luminary, which is this level of Mesiras Nefesh. So very interesting over here, because what we're saying is through in this story of Purim, on one hand we're saying it's the Gzeira that caused them to do this, on the other hand we're also saying it's Mordechai. So what is it? So who bear Gzeira Davka Bo Mesiras Nefesh. So we're saying is the Gzeira, the decree of Haman, is what caused him to have this Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh he mitzad etzem and Nechama. Why? Because Mesiras Nefesh comes from the essence of the soul. Shulamis Megillah is even above any revelation, and they tapped into that core, that essential core that we have, which is called Mesiras Nefesh, which means we're totally with the program. We're all with the program. It's just what's revealed is something different, but in essence, we're all with the program. The luminary. This is the luminary. That's why I say crushed olive oil for the luminary, meaning for that essence of where everything is real, that Mesiras Nefesh level that we all have within us. And through being crushed, which is like what the pasuk is saying, through crush you reach the mar. Reveal the essence of the neshama, which is the mar. So that's what we're saying in the story of Purim. But what's the story with the Rebbe over here? What's the story with the Mordechai? But if you look at the Frierdiker's maamer, the order of the maamer, this concept of being crushed to the luminary, we just said now and today, is coming after the fact that after what the Frierdiker explains about the Hemna, the Moshe, their faithful shepherd, the Rebbe of the generation, the Mordechai. So it's mashma. So what comes out of that? So it's also connected to Moshe. We need to understand this dynamic because the Purim story, especially in the Friedrich of his maamer, it sounds very much, it's the situation of being crushed causes them to have this serious nefesh to reach the mar. But in the maamer, just before that, he talks about the Raimhemna, the other Moshe Rabbeinu, every generation, that he feeds and stains the Yidden with the Munah. That gives that ability that we have this strength. So what's this dynamic of play? Is it the being crushed of Galus? Or is it the Moshe giving us the ability with the Munah B'Pnimius? So what is going on here? And for that answer, we're going to continue tomorrow explaining. So the question we're going to ask ourselves today for the lesson we can think about is how real is it by us, and how much is the connection of the Rebbe helping us, and how much is our learning of the Rebbe giving our Munah to be B'Pnimius? Meaning, what's a Munah B'Pnimius? In simple, it means that when we learn something, it doesn't have to be when we learn something, but it means that we're able to recognize where we're holding and where we need to be holding, and we're able to recognize that and look at how we can take steps in that direction. That's essentially B'Pnimius. And it's that avodah. And how do we do this? How do we get to that level? Those levels through learning chassidus to connect to the Rebbe. Watching Rebbe videos, going to the oil, learning chassidus, of course, for bringings, connecting with friends and mashpirim and things like this. And that's what we're meant to be doing. So the question we can ask ourselves is, how is that holding? And also, how does it contrast between me when I was in seminary and where I am now? How do all these dynamics go together? To be continued tomorrow. Thank you very much for joining, and have a good day.